Cyanotype Daydream, the girl who dreamt the world, is a harrowing experience, but a beautiful one at that. Developed and published by Laplacian, it follows the story of Kyoto and Yonagi, a guy who remembers nothing and a girl who seemingly is void of emotion, but they are tasked to simply sleep their time away. By the time they complete 3 dreams to their entirety, the truth behind their containment shall be revealed, alongside the mastermind behind the whole scheme in the first place. Due to the structure of the game, you can feel that you're playing 3 short stories that come together at the end to create a bigger picture, and in that sense I understand if someone may be put off by this approach of storytelling. It is easy to go wrong with this approach, where everything feels convoluted and the stories themselves feel bare bones, needing more time to fully flesh them out, and ruining the overall experience of playing the game and the overall enjoyment that comes when reaching the climax of a story. However, if done right, this approach can really heighten storytelling, and let me fully assure you, Cyanotype Daydream does this pleasantly well, allowing for every story to tell its own tale, each one focusing on a different complexity of struggles, offering a refreshing experience that can easily grip the individual. Case 1 follows Arishima Kaoru, a 45-year-old failed novelist who is letting life pass by aimlessly, a shell of his former youthful ambitious self. By pure chance, he meets the daughter of Shuho Hatano, a novelist and former peer he aspired to be like. This girl was Rin Hatano, who struggles with coming to terms with her father's death, pondering their relationship and what it all means, while simultaneously living in the shadow of her overachieving father. Meeting Rin sends Arishima's life into turmoil as he's forced to face failings of his past that he long suppressed and gave up upon. As their relationship grows, Arishima fights off immoral desires towards Rin. We'll come back to this later because, well, I definitely have some thoughts on this. While also gaining the courage to write again. Though seemingly a story of hope, it certainly can turn very dark. Case 1 did a great job at bringing initial intrigue towards the story at hand for me. I was invested enough in wanting to see Arishima succeed, and finally achieving his goals of becoming a novelist while overcoming his past struggles. The story really tries very hard, and I mean very hard, to make you sympathize with Arishima. However, while they started off very well, I really do feel like it was a bit overdone in some of the extremities the story took later on, in what seemed more like a way to sell fan service and nothing more. But such scenes really took me away from what I would consider the stronger point about this case. That being the depiction of depression. I would like to preface that not everyone may think the same way as myself on this point. Depression can have many different faces and comes in many different forms depending on the person. But to me, Case 1 truly gave me one of the closest depictions I've felt towards my own struggles with depression. Seeing Arishima at first, living like a husk of himself, a robot, journaling on and on with his lecture while being miles away from his own mind. Just living the everyday cycle he always has, which at first he doesn't even bat an eyelash to. To see, though, the eventual realization of how suffocating that lifestyle was for him, as soon as he was faced with a different future he could have had. To realize he has wasted away so much of his life, and desperately then he claws at the future he wants. Desperately getting lost, trying to accomplish something more in his life. Anything is better than monotony. Anything is better than giving up. Anything is better than droning on in his lectures. Anything is better than the endless suffocation he felt. Seeing his struggles really hit me and have stuck with me. I think this part in the story was beautifully written that doesn't shy away from the true nature of depression. There was a certain scene that resonated with me more though. A very haunting and vivid scene in my mind that really reminds me of how scary it is to lose yourself, so much that you don't even recognize the person who you are at that moment in time. Spoiler warning! The next thing I will talk about will include heavy spoilers of Case 1, so watch at your own discretion if you don't care about this part being spoiled. One scene in particular I could never forgive myself if I didn't mention would be the bathroom scene. It is a climax of Arishima's depression and spiral of losing his sanity, once he has crazily idolized Shiho as some untainable godlike figure he could never hope of achieving, albeit being similar to him in a retrospective way. I would like to state how I have barely seen this reputation done before. Maybe I've just not seen enough, but Cyanotype is a form of media I've seen this craziness depicted well. After being hit with such hard-pressed and overwhelming emotions of suffocation, of the inescapability of his pitiful life, the only thing he has to turn to was his novel writing and Shiho. He gives himself his way out by believing it'll be okay as long as he can get to know Shiho. As he delves deeper into Shiho's diaries and sees his suffering was similar to his, it is very obvious why he becomes obsessed. He is now similar to his idol. The goal he was striving for led him to suffer, just like Shiho. Shiho and himself are one of the same. Both were meant for suffering, both aren't fit for this world. Both need to make a clear exit. With a very set mind, Arishima makes his way to the bathroom, the very same room where Shiho died. With a very set mind, he turns on the tap and, with a very set mind, he pursues to finally become one with Shiho. All that can be heard is the running water. All the dialogue we get to see is deranged thoughts coming from Arishima's mind. Everything feels tense. It feels unsettling. It goes on for some time as his struggles are really cemented onto you. He was driven mad. He was suffering so much. He believed it was his only way out. Just before those last moments, however, he receives a text from Rin. She asks him if she cut the fish well. Immediately he thought he didn't want to die. This hit me somewhere deep down due to a similar experience myself. That one real hope is sometimes, no matter how cheesy it sounds, the key to overcoming a terrible fate. One message, one person to reach out. At the right time, for me that touching reality makes me want to pursue, to be that hope for someone, as someone that has been there myself. So moral of the story, there is always hope. Don't give up, okay? Now, I wish I could praise the story more, however, while it is definitely an enjoyable story, there is one huge downside in my experience while playing this game. While it was obvious, I still didn't like it, and that one thing is the relationship between Rin and Arishima. Personally, I believe it would have been better if it played out as more of a parental role between the two. Considering Rin had lost a father, that dynamic could have worked better, in my opinion. Arishima feeling like the father she never really had. It would have made sense for Rin to confuse romantic feelings for Arishima with parental love, as in reality, she has never really experienced parental love, and therefore she wouldn't be able to differentiate between romantic feelings and parental love. Arishima, as seen in the story, he does have some moral sense that such a relationship is immoral and incorrect, and he shouldn't pursue it. Big emphasis on that, by the way. He could have ignored Rin's advances when she tried to get more flirtatious. And by the end of the story, he could have explained that he saw her as a daughter, and he could have expressed a gratitude to her through the eyes of a parent, and explained to Rin she most likely had those kind of feelings towards him, not like actual romantic feelings. Although I do get they have to sell the visual novels somehow, and you know, fan service is what sells, and many people would want to see the main two protagonists get together in the end, so I guess this wins in the end, you know, over the greater story. Sadly, this ruined my overall impression of this case, and it made it my least favourite, even though I desperately wanted to love it a lot. Alas, at least something stuck with me from this endeavour, and that is what counts the most, in my opinion. Next, we have Case 2. Case 2 follows William Shakespeare, who runs a pub with his blind and debilitating father. They have barely enough money to get by, but they enjoy their days nevertheless. The pub in question is also used as a secret gathering for Catholics. During the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, Catholics were being beheaded in public, which has a bit more relevance later in the story. One night, due to his father's condition worsening one day, Will decides to steal a noble's deer. Predictably enough, he gets caught and is sentenced to death. However, Olivia Berry, a very astute woman, recognizes him to be Shakespeare, the one who writes amazing plays, and requests him to be given to her as her slave. Playwright, I would like to note. Olivia wants to become the world's best actor, despite women being restricted from acting in the Elizabethan era. Alas, she doesn't care and is adamant on changing things. And that's important for later on, for her entire character development actually. Olivia Berry takes over William Shakespeare's life and forces him to write plays for her as well as act in the plays he writes. To get the sense of theatre, William's life is thrown into chaos, but eventually he is determined to make his newly established dreams come true, as well as Olivia's dreams soon after. Although his life surely follows the script of a true Shakespearean play. Honestly, while the Shakespearean story arc is well versed, did you see what I did there? It is hard to make a more in-depth comment on the story. The world building is quite well done as it tries to portray the Elizabethan era. The story picks up almost immediately, unlike its counterparts, Case 1 and Case 2, which both have a slower start and progression, which can be a great hook if this is the first dream you'll experience. I will cover this more later on. Considering as well the scenery is vastly different from the other two, which focuses on more of a school setting, Case 2 definitely has a more appealing setting and gives a different change of pace from the other two. The story goes by smoothly and is what you may expect from the very premise alone. Will and Olivia are working together to gain a performance performance in front of the queen, and they do whatever they can to achieve this, putting in a lot of effort and having to overcome some challenges and differences between the two, until possibly that dream comes to fruition. As you can see, it's a pretty simple story, and is telling for the most part, although it's still very enjoyable and it attempts at some kind of vehicle of opposition to our protagonist's goals. This being namely a rival, a historical rival from Shakespeare's real life as an antagonist. However, they don't really do much to drive the plot and come off as one of the least intimidating antagonists I've ever seen. Although he is a pretty irrelevant character, and so we'll just pretend he doesn't exist. Minus this one amazing line of dialogue that is included in the official translation for some reason. Damn, did they really nail us Brits with this one line. Damn, I can't get enough of those fish and chips, and gladly they have now become a form of literature. A most amazing and transformative way to describe such an antagonist. It really portrays how sinister he is. Better watch out for him. Better watch out. He's coming for you. With his fucking fish and chips, evil staring glare. Anyways. Before he is now swiftly swept into irrelevance, before the inclusion of reappearing to add conflict to the plot. Once again. One of the things I do appreciate the most about this route is purely the ending. They went above and beyond to make it a real Shakespearean ending, and that I can appreciate greatly. It is almost like I'm finally reading Shakespeare's revolutionary work. You know, the long manuscripts written in the incomprehensible Old English, which for some reason everyone has seemed to master, and try to convince you that Hamlet is the unspoken god of theatre which no new story could ever live up to, and if you haven't experienced it yourself, then you haven't lived. Well, the joke is now undone. I finally experienced his masterful works for a new story about Shakespeare himself, and I enjoyed every minute of it. Who would have thought I could enjoy one of Shakespeare's stories inside another story? This surely beats the trauma I received from having to read all of Shakespeare's plays for my English classes back in high school, while having to memorize so many goddamn quotes in Old English to express the tragedies because I'm supposed to be some encyclopedia now. Surely still not pent up over that. In all seriousness though, I can really appreciate the ending of Case 2, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if it led more people to be interested in Shakespeare's works. It presents them in definitely a more approachable way than the original source material themselves, and in a more entertaining way in some people's eyes, at least in my eyes. Alas though, the flashbacks I still receive from my English classes were enough to dissuade me from being one of the unsuspecting people. Oh well, I guess my script says otherwise, so take what I said with a grain of salt. Now on to Case 3. Case 3 follows Kana Ame, who is a second year at Narayama Sky Academy. Although it may be more accurate to call him a dropout, as he spends a majority of his time trying to fix his late mother's camper van due to chasing after his mother's dreams of taking a picture of their Halley's Comet in her stead. I also forgot to mention Kana is also an aspiring photographer, wanting to follow in his mother's steps of bringing out the beauty in photographs. However, a teacher in training is sent over to request Kana to come back to school. Unbeknownst to this, his father is concerned. They end up having a falling out and the relationship becomes strained. Eventually, the teacher in training, introduced as a Momonochi Sumomo, and she's able to convince Kana to come back to school for the last remaining week to appease his father. Desperate to fix the camper van before the comet passes, he calls in a professional mechanic who is a former social media star. Just a note here, there is no electronics in this world anymore due to artificial pigeons, which I will cover a bit later on because I know it sounds very weird. Azuki, however, says she cannot help and leaves Kana aimlessly wondering what he can do from this point onwards. Skipping ahead a little, the story in summary ends up focusing on Kana working with Azuki and Sumomo over the summer to achieve his dreams of becoming a photographer while capturing the beauty of Halley's Comet. Case 3 was definitely my favourite of the three, and that isn't because it is revolutionary or it does something crazy. Quite the opposite actually. It was full of slice of life, had a lot of nature, it was very slow, it was very optimistic and bright and hopeful. And that is why I really loved it. It didn't try to add any kind of drama element that was super impactful. It was super down to earth about a kid simply trying to pursue his dreams regardless of the chances of success. I'll be honest, I'm a sucker for these types of stories in the end. I'm sure the slow progression in itself isn't everyone's cup of tea, and the premise of a child pursuing his dream due to being inspired by his late mother, I know this premise can seem generic at best to many people, but sometimes that is okay. Sometimes a story like this can be greatly appreciated, especially when it's sandwiched between two more drama-orientated stories. It helps to stick out from the crowd. I won't lie though, the first thing that stuck out to me during this case was the CGs, and while I would prefer to talk about this later, I cannot avoid it here due to the dependence I had on these for my enjoyment of the story. Kana is a photographer, and so CGs are really important in the story specifically. This is because they need to convey what it is Kana is trying to capture in his photography. photography. This is done very well by using such bright colours to make Sumomo shine whenever Kana photographs her, while contrasting with the more dull, yet still beautiful CGs of more nature-esque shots. It really captures what he himself is most interested in. Sumomo never fails to shine in whatever photo Kana may take in the story. To apply her to even a photo he took previously speaks miles of difference, as Sumomo is literally radiating with brightness. Partially thanks to incredible bright design, but also smile, obviously. I would love to touch upon Sumomo's design at some point, as it really speaks volumes for her character. We not only follow Kana's struggles through realizing his dreams of becoming a photographer and making it a reality, but we also follow Azuki, well, things just kind of work out for her, I guess. I mean, she is a comic relief character, so there's not much more you could ask for, really. One other thing that is worth a mention is how the story tries to add some kind of rationale without playing up something for a huge dramatic scene that would last for way too long and wouldn't have been necessary. This is simply the reaction of Kana's father not approving that he's skipping school to become a photographer. While they could have solely focused on his dad being incredibly rude, or Kana being incredibly rude, instead they take a more realistic portrayal of the situation. Kana acts like his father doesn't get him and acts as if his father really isn't supporting his dream. You know, he actually acts like a 16-year-old. You know how they're supposed to be. Cough, 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 cough. While in reality, his father just wants the best for his son and doesn't want Kana to have an insecure future. You can really tell how much he cares for his son, which is why Kana is given space. I just think dynamics like this really add to the experience and are worth mentioning. Overall, Case 3 is just a very refreshing break from the other two. It doesn't do anything huge, but it did enough for me to consider it one of my favourites. I would consider it to be the most positive one out of the three and the one with the most satisfying conclusion, if you don't regard the after stories. While I felt the other two stories suffered from a rushed ending, I feel like Case 3 had a nice pace throughout its playtime and had a satisfying ending where I hope for the best for the characters. Finally, I really loved the message that came from this case. While being very simple, it still really came through and was a nice one at that. Stay true to yourself and don't give up on your dream. And finally, we have Case 0. Case 0 follows Yonagi and Kaito. It explains the entire reason why they are in the experiment and what the aim of it is. We learn about the world and how society has been moved underground due to a supposed genetic mutation, which allows the sun's UV rays to be extremely deadly to human touch. We get to see the beginnings of Kaito and Yonagi when they were younger, how they met, how the relationship grew, and how these two are in essence connected to one another. I would like to refrain from writing too much detail on the plot of Case 0, as I feel it really is something you should experience yourself, and it would entirely ruin the plot and emotion of the ending, which is why I won't go too in depth, because I implore you to read this visual novel. Case 0 is about half of the runtime for the visual novel, so it make up, I would say, a large part of your enjoyment of Cyanotype Daydream. I really like how all three cases link back to Case 0, and in the context of the main plot, it all makes sense and all the cases come together in a sense. I also feel like the story is the most engaging in Case 0, which is pretty obvious, as if it were not, then it would feel more like a dumpster fire considering it is the main plot. Case 0 is also riddled with many, and when I say many, I mean several, plot twists, so there will always be something holding your intrigue. Although the pacing of the first section of the story may feel a bit slow-paced, it soon picks back up again after an hour or so I implore you to experience this one for yourself. That is the last bit I will mention about Case 0, as anything else will serve only as a spoiler. Intermission! So as I break from the bulk of the writing, that is yet to come, I would like to mention a cool mechanic they added into this game. That is, the cases you play will be randomly selected, meaning one person may experience Case 1 as their first dream, while you may have gotten Case 3. It may not be a groundbreaking mechanic, but I think it is a neat one at that. In a sense, it makes everyone's experiences of the game different. Although this could play to its downfall in some cases, due to the vastly different settings of each dream, if a player starts off with, let's say, the case they are, would be interested in the least, then they may end up just dropping the game right there and then. A double-edged sword to say the least, but hey, I suppose you could see it as a form of gambling. That is correct, they have gotchified their game. If that doesn't sell you on playing this game alone, then what will? A gotchified visual novel? Who would have thunk the entire idea? It's not like majority of gotcha games are kind of a similar idea. But at least this is no real money. It's just your enjoyment. Which, let's be honest, that's a better form of gambling. A truly revolutionary development in the scene of visual novels, I tell you. Moving on to what some consider the most important part of any story is the character. I would say that while the majority of the characters don't do anything bad, with that one exception, Arishima, cough cough, cough cough. They don't really do much good either. To put it bluntly, a lot of the characters really don't stand out, besides their generic archetype. Some examples of this being, the neglectful wife is neglectful. The rude and blunt mechanic is, well, rude and blunt. The weird foreign dude says weird stuff and is oddly very hands-on. If you know what I mean.
いいね。エクセレントじゃないか。
This is a formula for most, if not all, of the side characters. I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. If done right, such characters can be quite trifling and can elicit a lot of enjoyment. But I would say for Cyanotype, it really is a highly 50-50 personal preference kind of thing. While I enjoyed Azuki the engineer, for example, in case 3, I can understand how her abrasiveness and rudeness may become annoying quite easily for someone, as she offers nothing else to redeem herself besides that one quality. Same for the weird foreign guy, Spencer, in case 2. I really didn't like his baseless harassment within the story, just frustrating. Although someone else may find some comic relief in such an exchange compared to a more serious and tsundere Olivia, perhaps. I would like to differentiate the side characters from case 0 though. While again they are not the most groundbreaking, they may offer more than the other 3 cases. Most likely due to having a bit more time with them, or due to the fact 90% of the side characters in case 0 are kinda. It's a lot easier for me to like them, although nothing that made them too memorable. Minus one annoying bratty kid, I will just gladly gloss over him. The main focus when it comes to characters is obviously the interactions between Kaito and Yonagi in their various streams, taking on the role of side characters within each different case. Olivia and William, Rin and Arishima, and finally Momochi and Kana. I definitely felt Momochi and Kana were my favourite duo out of the 3. I felt they respected each other's boundaries and bounced off each other very well, although I'm slightly biased since my favourite types of characters are the really peppy, cheerful, very kind of characters, you know? And also case 3 was my favourite, so... Kana as the main protagonist wasn't anything too special though, just a rebellious kid aiming for his dreams without taking the most consideration of the feelings of those around him while trying to accept his mother's departure. Due to this though, the introduction of Momochi's bubbly personality really makes the duo work well, and I found myself really appreciating how they learn from each other and about their own individual experiences, and are able to move on and accept themselves at the end of everything. William Shakespeare surprised me though. I thought he'd be prudent and just really in his own world without too much regard for others. Instead, William Shakespeare was a cross-dresser. There is also Olivia Berry, a tsundere independent leading woman who wishes to perform on a stage because she can act just as well as a man could. While this summary makes Olivia on paper seem like a well-written character, which I do believe in this sense, she is a well-written character, there is one real defining quality about her personality, which is... Moving on, we have Arishima and Rin. There are also real main characters, Kaito and Yonagi. Obviously, they are my favourite pairing out of them all, which isn't really hard because so much time is given to them. I want to first lead by saying Kaito for me is a complicated character though. He acts in a way that makes sense for what he goes through throughout the story. However, due to this, there were some parts I truly detested him, which in a sense, I feel that was what I was supposed to be feeling at that given point in the story. Kaito is a very headstrong and very passionate man in his interests, so he very easily gets carried away with whatever he's working on in that given moment. That means he becomes quite oblivious in the worst of times and ends up hurting those he may care about. That is his biggest flaw as a person. I really love how they explore this in case 0 though, and I love seeing his progression throughout the story to be a lot more of an emotive and caring person. He still is a headstrong person, he still charges right at his goals, but he does this with a lot more awareness and carefulness by the end of things. I feel like it's easier as a reader to see where Kaito as a protagonist is coming from. With the way he acts and due to his headstrong nature, it is also easy to get swept along with Kaito's ideals and actions as a reader, which makes it even more satisfying when a problem arises for our main character, and we can feel the bluntness of the pain as he does, before feeling the conviction and resolve he does when it comes to fixing that said issue. Overall, I wouldn't say he is the most unique character by any stretch of the imagination, but in my eyes, he's a well-written one and he gets the job done as a narrative tool that he needs to be. Then we have Yonagi! Best girl in the entire series, by the way. Well, I could go on and on about how much I really love her as a character, why she's the best character in the game. I will refrain myself for now. Yonagi is a very innocent character that despite all of the hardships she faces, she does her best to look ahead in her life. She tries her best to be positive and really wishes she could have a happy future. She takes life one step at a time and really enjoys the smaller things in her life, As well as having those that give her the most comfort in life, she doesn't need anything else. She acts as a great weight for Kaito to lean on when he truly needs support. Because of all of this, you cannot help but root for Yonagi. Through trial and tribulations, you want to see her thrive. You want to see her reach that happy future that she so desires. Which makes everything, even the smallest hurdles she faces, hit that much more. I would also like to note here that Yonagi's voice actor does a really great job, honestly. There is one scene where Kaito and Yonagi have a fight due to different beliefs. In the end, and Yonagi ends up raising her voice out of frustration and desperation. It was shocking to hear her shout. I was completely caught off guard and I was on edge. Taking in every word she said, she swept me away within my own emotions, captivating me completely. I could really feel like I was in that moment myself. So to sum it up, Yonagi is the best girl, nothing could convince me otherwise, and damn did I cry my eyes out for her. Final note on characters briefly. Izumo, great support character for Kaito and Yonagi. At many points I was left wondering if she truly felt nothing and if I was only being swept away in delusions created by those two in believing she did have true sentience. Professor, Mr. had pity on me at his finest. There is not much I can say at this moment about the professor, so I'd like to leave it on one note. To me, he felt pretty pathetic as a character, as a man, and I ended up feeling some disdain towards him at the end. When it comes to the music of Cyanotype, I think it was a good soundtrack. However, in my opinion, no track really stood out to me. Each case of Cyanotype has an opening that are very high quality, may I add, and they are all pretty solid songs, but none felt too unique or out of the ordinary. Although, to be fair, my taste of music is quite out of the ordinary in and of itself. The soundtrack or OST is fine at best, definitely not a contender for best part of the game though. However, the art and CGs are. Honestly, some of the CGs are just breathtaking, especially those found in Case 3. I found myself really taking my time to take in some of the CGs whenever they popped up on the screen. Everything felt very smooth, almost hand-drawn, as the strokes looked so smooth. The colours as well were so very vibrant, and I just loved how they looked, honestly. Truly, some of the CGs have been stuck in my head for a while now since I finished playing Cyanotype. They really can portray the emotion they want to portray. The art alone is a reason I would be willing to check out some of the newer or older games from Laplacian. Overall, Cyanotype was a real experience. It blew me away in some areas, made me question some parts of my own experiences, gripped me with its plot and never-ending plot twists, and overall made me feel like this is an experience more people should have. I wanted to perhaps encourage anyone on the fence about picking up this visual novel, or anyone who doesn't even know of its existence, to give it a shot, as I'm quite sure you would not be disappointed. And if you are, you can always blame me for misdirecting you, I guess. Else, this is also a love letter to those who enjoy Cyanotype Daydream. Cyanotype Daydream truly was a great ride. Thank you for joining me on this journey of existentialism. Yeah, that's all I got.